Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Glasgow Loves. Welcome Pascal Lamy this morning, Professor Emeritus in the Law Institute, and thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us at this busy time. My name's Fiona Wishlade, and also with us on the chat, Jenny Burnt Poor. Jenny's monitoring social media for questions that come in to us through Facebook or Twitter. So please send your questions if you have. And Bernd is making sure that the technology works okay for us and recording the session for later. Pascal Lamy, no introduction really. You were Director General of the WTO and European Trade Commissioner, and now chair the Paris Peace Forum and one of the 5 mission boards for the EU R&D program Horizon Europe. So you have a wealth of experience. Help us to understand a little bit what has happened, what's happening now, and what might happen next. So maybe I can start by asking you to look back to 4.5 years ago. So the UK is now heading really for quite an extreme version of Brexit, whether it's a no deal or whether there is a thin deal. Came out. Did you think that this would be the outcome? Did you think that this was what would happen, or did you envisage something else?
Well, to be frank, like many others, I did not know. What I knew was one that the long-range history of the relationship between the UK and the continent is with many chapters, and that on the morning of this bad night, I knew that a new chapter would have to be written. Others had been with a lot of distance, others had been with a lot of proximity. We know that there are structural reasons behind this, both political, economical, cultural. What I knew, the other thing I knew was that there would be a problem between the desire which was expressed with the referendum of the UK to leave the European Union politically, and the impact of this economically. And the relationship of the UK with the European Union has always been with an economic desire to join the Union, because economic integration, opening markets, removing obstacles to trade is a big tradition in the British culture. And I remember when I was working with Jacques Delors in the 80s and 90s, that the British were the ones that were pushing a lot, for instance, to achieve the internal market. Mm-hmm. So, an economic desire of proximity, integration. I'm not saying union because this is on the political side, and a political reluctance to political integration. So a contradiction, in a way, a tension between a desire for economic integration and a reluctance to political union. And we've seen that played since, let's say, 70 or 80 years. Sometimes the desire for economic integration is stronger, and then the UK joins, and then the reluctance to political union is stronger, and then the UK distances. Mm. And I think that we are now in the midst of this contradiction. The benefits of political Brexit, i.e., let's get rid of these Brussels constraints, let's recover our independence, our freedom, and this is a sort of nice looking political narrative is there, but the problem now is to limit as much as possible the economic consequences of this, which we've known from the very beginning, and this negotiation and what has happened since in the UK economy show that there has to be, whether we like it or not, there has to be an economic cost to this political decision. How much is the cost is what is at stake now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that brings me, I think, the second question we had, which is about the sticking points. I mean, you've mentioned the contradiction between the economic integration, or more, for the first time, the economic disintegration element of the trade agreement. I mean, when it comes down to the detail, a lot of things have focused on the issue of state aid, and now it seems fisheries. Have you been surprised at those the sticking points on a technical level, or is that just a reflection of the wider contradiction that you just mentioned?
No, as far as I'm concerned, there's no surprise. I mean, fish always was to be a problem because we now fish in UK waters and British fish in EU waters, and there is quite a lot of fish in UK waters, a bit less in EU waters. I mean, how much of remaining fishing rights for the Europeans in UK waters and how much of access to the European market for UK fishermen, that has to be determined. It's a complex compromise, but if you really want to compromise, there is a solution to that. And like in any of these apparently intractable equations, a bit of money and a bit of time will help to oil a compromise if there has to be a compromise. And after all, this is less than 1% of our economies, although when we know that for at least partially good reasons, the fishermen population is a politically extremely influential one, like farmers, for reasons which we don't have time to develop. Mm-hmm. Now, the other side, which is removing the UK egg from the EU omelette trade-wise, which is the way I have defined the problem the day after the referendum, we always knew that removing an egg from an omelette was a complex thing, because we've never done that. As you rightly said in your question, the whole history of recent years, decades, if not centuries, has been about trade integration, trade opening. Mm-hmm. In modern times, with modern countries, up to art, economic science, a high level of cultural education and political maturity, the British decide to move the other way around. Now, inevitably, because of what the economic integration in EU is, going the reverse is inevitably raising quite a lot of problems. We have to remember that within the European Union, we only removed borders very late in 1992, whereas the common market was created in 1957. Yeah. And why did we keep borders during such a long time with a common market? Not because we had tariffs or quantitative restrictions or anti-dumping duties on each other, but because we had regulatory borders. And borders in the internal market at the time were only about precaution meaning that until we removed these borders, we didn't do it because we exercised precaution in a different way.
Yep.
We thought that German beer was German, Belgian beer was Belgian, and French beer was French. At some time, we either decided that what was good for the Germans should be good for the Belgians and the French and the other way around, which is what we call mutual recognition, or we decided to harmonize the sanitary and phytosanitary conditions under which beer is produced. And only at that time, when we had leveled precaution among us, did we remove borders.
Yep.
Now, reinstalling a border is the inevitable consequence of the UK having decided to be able to exercise a different level of precaution because of its recovered sovereignty.
Yep. Yep.
Whether they do it or not is another question, but they have decided they would acquire the possibility to diverge, thus creating a possible situation where, precaution-wise, the UK would be at a lower level than the European Union, which for the European Union is a problem. It may not be a problem to have a different level of precaution in trading with Australia or New Zealand or Canada or Japan, because this is 5% of the EU trade relationship. It is inevitably a possible problem with the UK, who trades 40% of its trade with the continent and the other way around. So the problem that has to be solved is, will the UK exercise its right to diverge downwards? Mm-hmm. The upwards problem is not a problem, but downwards. And what if this happens? And the reality of this is, in simple terms, is the negotiation is about the thickness of the border. If UK diverges a lot, then the border will be thick, because we will have to check a lot of what comes into the European Union. And this is not just good for goods, but it's also for services. And if the UK diverges little, then the border will be thin. The problem being, of course, that for domestic political reasons, Mr. Boris Johnson does not want to say whether or not and on which items will the UK diverge, because this would raise problems with UK consumers and UK citizens. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem. It's as long as the UK position is unclear on this, we on the continent have to take a number of guarantees that this is not going to be what we call in our trade jargon regulatory dumping, or what I call precaution dumping. So that's the issue.
Yeah. I mean, part of that discussion is also around the issue of state aid, and that perhaps in a sense is more surprising, because the UK historically has never used state aid all that much, and has then come to insist on autonomy and potentially operating under WTO rules on the subsidy side. I wonder if you're surprised by that stance.
I'm not surprised, because strong disciplines on state aid is a level of precaution when you open trade. If you open trade, you want to compete on a fair standard. Mm-hmm. And disciplines on state aid are a precaution to avoid trade opening resulting in dumping or subsidizing in a way that imbalances the fairness of competition. Now, you have disciplines on state aid in the World Trade Organization, in the WTO, but they are extremely weak. Mm-hmm. They exist, but they are sort of dotted disciplines, whether within the European Union, from the very beginning, we decided to have very strict rules monitoring control of state aids, but it's one version of precaution. State aid disciplines is a precaution to ensure competition and making sure that if we keep trade as open as possible, this will not be hampered by state aids that debalance competition is one of the many versions of the precaution, as well as on pesticide residues or size of bumpers or diplomas for nurses or architects or accountants. There's a whole range in the way our economic systems work now that is a result of wanting to make sure that the health, the security, the safety of consumers, the rights of citizens in data handling or privacy standards. This is this universe which is now at stake. And the strange thing, in my view, and this is why I've always had a big question mark on this issue of Brexit, that at the end of the day, the British belong to a cultural, historical, intellectual, philosophical European model, which is the one that frames the European level of precaution, and that I never thought that they would really distance from that, which means that at the end of the day, I've always thought, and I remain of the view, that 10, 15 years from now, we would realize that a political Brexit is one thing, an economic Brexit is another thing, and that we probably will have a sort of Brino, what you call Brino, Brexit in name only, which of course is an anathema for the hardline of the Brexiters, who then believe they will have been cheated. But my sense is that the Brexiters might be cheated by history one day. I'm not sure about that, but that's, in my view, the most likely scenario for the long term.
Okay. Look ahead to the future in a minute, but just, I mean, I suppose picking up on something that alluded to already, and I wonder whether, I mean, sometimes in looking at it from the outside, have the sense that the two parties have been talking across one another, a kind of a dialogue of the deaf. I mean, we read in the British press that the EU has not understood the importance of sovereignty to the UK, whatever that might mean, and at the same time, Boris Johnson seems to have been expecting to be able to deal directly with Chancellor Merkel in finalizing a deal. So you know, do you think the two sides have, or to what extent, or maybe underestimated one another in the negotiations?
I mean, I think one, on sovereignty, we have a big difference. We believe in sovereignty, but we believe that in the world of today and tomorrow, which will be dominated by elephants like China or the US, the right level of sovereignty, in order for sovereignty to be practically exercised, is at EU level. Whereas the ones that decided to move on the Brexit side believe that sovereignty is better exercised at a country level. This is a big difference of view on the present and on the future. We do believe in sovereignty. We do believe the European people have values and interests that need to be both defended and promoted. We simply believe that we will do that together, whereas we couldn't do that anymore individually. That's a big difference. Now, as far as the trade negotiation, the part of the negotiation which is about trade is concerned, we have a constitution, we have treaties that say that trade is an EU competence.
Yeah.
So this is to be negotiated with the European Commission, who is the negotiator for trade, with a mandate from both the upper house, which is the Council of Ministers, and the lower house, which is the European Parliament. And as long as the Commission remains within the mandate it has, it's up to the Commission to negotiate. It's more efficient. And the negotiating position is absolutely clear from the very beginning. The UK has decided to exit. Fine. This will not change the way we operate and we run and we integrate on the continent, but we don't want this to harm our interests. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So perhaps Boris Johnson had just maybe forgotten momentarily that the UK had already left. Okay.
That's a possible explanation, assuming Boris Johnson, which I happen to know personally because he was a young journalist in Brussels in my first life in Brussels, assuming he has a sort of definite vision of where he wants to go, which I'm not sure. I think he's more of a player, gambler, entertainer than a man with a very strict, rational, long-term vision of where he and his country should go.
Good.
But that's a personal opinion.
But one that's widely shared, I think. Jenny, is there any questions from social media that you want to pick up?
Just there's a few comments. There's one from Tom just saying he's pro-EU and pro-UK for that reason. And Dee is just saying, you know, how many of us do appreciate all the benefits of being in the EU, that with, you know, the cooperation over the years. And another question just that you might be able to help us with. So Boris Johnson, you know, has been heard to say often that we might prosper mightily under no deal. You've obviously said it's better at a continent level to work with the EU, but is there a possibility we could prosper mightily under no deal?
Well, that's not my view, because I believe, like the British for many, many years, that opening market and integrating economies in a global capitalist model, whether we like it or not is another question, is the way to go. Economic integration is efficient. It sometimes is painful, but it is efficient. And that's, by the way, what the British have been advocating, as I already said, when they were one of the main advocates of achieving the internal market, which was opening borders, leveling the playing field, so that the size of the market would bring the economies of scale that then go into the pocket of consumers and citizens, which is what economic growth is in the world of today, which is a sum of efficiency increases. So I personally still believe that economic integration is the way to go. This is true at EU level with a high degree of intensity. This is true, in my view, worldwide with a lower level of intensity. And there is a difference between globalization and economic integration in the EU in terms of strength, intensity, the deepness of the integration. And I believe that disintegration, I mean, to put it very simply, I believe economic integration is efficient and sometimes painful. And I would say economic disintegration is inefficient and always painful. And which is why I personally believe that there will be no real economic benefit to Brexit for the UK people. There will be costs, and what has happened so far, when you look at the economic impact of the last 4 years, and let's leave the COVID crisis aside, because we're all in there, So far, I have seen downsides and I have seen no upside so far.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, future and maybe looking the other side of the coin. Obviously, being from the UK, we're very much looking at it from a UK perspective. But one question is what impact the departure of the UK will have on EU integration. And some commentators have said, for example, that that the next generation EU package but would have been much less likely if the UK had still been a member. So, you know, what kind of effect might the departure of the UK have on EU longer term?
I think it has both a negative and a positive impact. And how will this balance in the future? I'm not sure. It has a negative impact in that it removes from the EU a large chunk of economic flesh, which is 15% of the EU economy. And if I believe in economic integration and in the impact of increasing the size of market, this is bad news. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, if my reasoning is that we can only exercise a proper influence, what we a few minutes ago called sovereignty, together, we will be less efficient, less strong without the UK than we would have been with the UK worldwide, because the UK is not only a solid economic bit of the world, but also has a diplomatic tradition, a sort of art of diplomacy, a sort of long-standing historical presence in the world, which we will miss. So it's a loss of weight, and the question is whether a loss of weight can be compensated by a gain in muscle, which is what sports doctors will tell you you should do. Now, on the other side, the positive side is that as far as muscle is concerned, we may be a bit stronger, because this tension, which I mentioned in the beginning, which is intrinsic in the UK geopolitical, geo-economic, philosophical, cultural posture, which is we like economic integration and we dislike political union, has slowed some of the steps forward of the EU in terms of political union.
Yeah.
So steps to political union will be easier. Steps to economic integration will not be hampered, but they will bring a bit less benefit than if the UK was part of the game, because of the shrinking of the size, this minus 15%, which is quite a chunk. But on the other side, the capacity to move forward for political reasons towards more political integration will be easier. And this is exactly what happened with the next generation package in July, which was triggered by the COVID crisis, where I'm not saying it was a Hamiltonian moment like many others have said, but I think we've crossed a red line in political integration, which is the capacity to borrow money together with a full solidarity between the members to borrow this money, spend it, and reimburse it, which probably would have been much harder with the British, because it is a clear sign of political integration.
Yeah. Listen, I know you've only got a couple of minutes left, and I think we could probably talk for a long time. But maybe I could just finish with question about your sort of like wider experience or international experience, obviously in the Commission, WTO, and now in the Paris Peace Forum and in the Delors Institute, and ask how optimistic do you feel about the future of international cooperation? Something that's had a bit of a bumpy ride during the Trump administration, with on the World Health Organization pulling out of the Paris agreement, and Brexit is arguably part of that. How do you see things playing out?
Well, I mean, clearly, and I'm speaking with the sort of benefit of 30 years of day-to-day practice of international cooperation, we are at a very low ebb of international cooperation. This COVID crisis is probably the lowest level I've ever experienced of international cooperation. In the international system, you always have a sort of mix of competition and cooperation, a sort of 50-50, with international institutions, treaties, fora like the G20, the G7. And we know that in a globalizing planet, we have to address global challenges more collectively on the one side, but on the other side, obviously this time, I would say what I have observed is 80% competition and 20% cooperation, which obviously is not the right mix. Now, there are fundamental reasons for that, which have to do with fundamentalism, whether it's religious or political fundamentalism, with a desire of many parts of this planet to go back to identity, because for a number of reasons, whether it's technology, whether it's globalization, it's difficult to make a distinction between the two. People feel that their identity is threatened, or that the future of their children will be worse than theirs. So there is a moment when there is doubt about science, doubt about democracy, doubt about progress, doubt about the future. And this shakes inevitably countries, their domestic political behavior, which has consequences. And Brexit and Trump are examples of that. But we also have our own problems within the Union. With Hungary and Poland, we have these problems with Brazil, with Turkey, with Russia, with Philippines. So we are in a difficult situation, worse than in the past. And of course, the COVID crisis will have created even more divisions in this world between the rich and the poor, country-wise and within countries, which will make cooperation more difficult, although I believe it's more necessary. And when you look at the other side of the coin, we have a vaccine 1 year after the appearance of this virus. And how did we do that? We did that with cooperation between scientists, between industry. It's the one that was cleared for the European Union recently, which is the same that the one that was cleared for the UK, although the UK will pay a bit more because not buying together with the European Union, is a transatlantic vaccine. It's a sort of US-German alliance. So we have a picture of the dire situation we're in cooperation-wise, but we also have a clear picture of where the solution is, my hope. And this is what we are trying to do with the Paris Peace Forum, which is about moving international cooperation beyond the relationship between sovereigns in engaging cities, businesses, NGOs, big academic institutions, I think is the way to go in order to rejuvenate, to revamp this classical model of sovereign-based diplomacy, which so far has had serious problems. So there are ways for the future, but we must accept that we probably have to change the way we operate, as we have, in my view at least, to change the way our economic systems impact both people and nature. So it's a period of very, very, very challenging but necessary transformations, in my view. And as far as Europe is concerned, I mean, Brexit is overall not good news, because not having the British with us, civilization-wise, I think, at the end of the day, is a negative, which is why I've always been sad about this. At no time have I had a sort of background joy. Oh, good that they now are gone. I know that some people feel this way on the European continent. That's not my way. I'm just sad.
Okay, well, it's a shame to end on a sad note, but you've given us a lot of food for thought at the end of this difficult year. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us, and take this opportunity to wish you a good Christmas and a happy New Year. So thank you very much, Pascal Lamy.
Same on your side, and I'm reasonably convinced that next year should be a bit happier than this one.
Let's hope so.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening to us. Bye.